Hi everybody, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a board game review channel where I give my honest opinion about everything I talk about, even if it does cause a bit of backlash every now and again. But someone's got to do it. So what I'm talking about here is the solo mode for Tiletum. I've already done a video on the multiplayer mode and like the game in general, so by all means please check that one out. But this is the solo mode specifically. I want to do a separate video when I talk about solo modes because A, it keeps the length for the other video down, but B, sometimes solo modes are kind of a very different game in their own right and they do need to be talked about separately. So this is another one of David Turkcey's designs. Seriously, I swear this guy does not sleep, have a social life, or anything else really, because his name is on everything in existence. Where do you find the time, my friend? Where do you find the time? Seriously, what is your secret? I need to know stat, because I do not have that kind of spare time. But this is another David Turkcey design, which means it's got various hallmarks of a David Turkcey design. Firstly, its own rulebook, which unlike Terracotta Army actually came in the box this time, thankfully. But you will also find that it's not the smallest rulebook in the world, and so there will also be things like priority sections where, where AI will do things based on what else is going on. So it's definitely got all these hallmarks. But I've given it a try, and interestingly, it might actually be better than the multiplayer. What you essentially do is you pick a difficulty rating and it will have so many challenge cards. So these challenge cards give the cardinals, as I'm basically calling it, a different ability. So the more of these you have in play, the harder the game it is. So an easy one, for example, might give them extra resource every time they take a die. It could be pretty lucrative. But what you'll then do is, depending on what difficulty that you've done and what you're sort of doing, you have so many of these decree cards, and these will essentially lay out in a row. I'm not going to do like a proper setup of them, you'll just have to see what they're like. But essentially you'll have 5, 6 of them, I think it's 5 of them that you have out in a row, and you'll have a little marker. We'll just use a spare merchant for the time being. What happens is essentially on their turn, you roll 2 dice and you look at the difference of the 2 values and you move this thing as many spaces along the cards as the difference in the value. Once you get there, it has a step-by-step priority system for what action it will do, whether it's architect or merchant or contracts, etc. And it's usually based on what dice are on the action wheel, but also on what the AI has done. I mean, has it built more houses and pillars? Yes, in which case, do this action. For the most part, they're actually pretty straightforward to go through, so I didn't have too much trouble there. It's a little bit more tricky when you got to remember, oh yeah, so if there's a tiebreaker, look at the dice, right, the bottom of the card has the dice colors, all right, check which ones. It can be a little bit stop-start in that respect, but then once the AI takes another turn, you reset the cardinal movement marker back to the start, roll 2 dice, and do it again, whether it moves or not. And different cards have different varying effects and different layouts for their actions, which will generally gear the opponent onto, say, being focused on houses, being focused on cathedrals and or contract tiles, and such the like. Now, I gotta give props. There is a lot of rules to absorb. Quite a few. This is not the easiest rulebook to absorb in your head. Do not, whatever you do, use this as a way to learn the game, because this does play a little bit differently to the multiplayer version. Get used to the main game first, then learn this. If you try to do both at once, it's too overwhelming. Trust me on this one, okay, from experience. But the rulebook is fairly well laid out. I mean, it's got the same amount of picture references as the other one does, although it does tend to go quite text heavy in some areas where I feel like more pictures would have been better, particularly when you've got on the cardinal bot's turn and there's literally no picture on that page, it's just all text. There's also quite a few different priority diagrams in terms of well, not diagrams, rows of text where you've basically got to go, right, okay, so resolve the cardinal's action based on where it took its die from. If it took it from a specific action, resolve it. If the die is from the Joker, do this. If the die is from the Joker but no action was specified, do this. There's quite a few of those, it must be said. But quite a bit of it is explained on the back of the book, because for some reason, unlike the main rulebook, this one actually has a reference guide in it. Why this one and not that one? Where are you on that one? But this one explains in bullet point form what the AI does on the various actions. It goes into what bonus tiles they prefer. It says what the term for their required resources are. And it has a general turn sequence for what they do. Once you've absorbed this book, this is kind of all you need to pilot the AI. And it doesn't take a huge amount to actually do the AI. You will certainly spend more time on your turns than you will the AI. But it is going to be a little bit of a slog to get to that point. You're going to need at least one game, possibly even two, before you're comfortable enough with the system and all the different, like, oh, so wait a minute, yeah, if it's done this, it'll do this in priority to that, to get to the point where you're comfortable with it. And then woe betide you if you put the game away and don't revisit it for a few weeks, because you're probably going to have to reabsorb it again. This is a downside I have with these types of AI solo modes. They're great when you play them, they're very difficult to jump back into, particularly if you put the game down for too long. But that's kind of what the gist is. You're just trying to beat the AI in terms of points, based on the challenge rating that you've done, the difficulty and what actions it's going for. It will naturally use up spaces on the board. You play the game as if it was a two-player, so you have very few dice on the action wheel, and there's very few spaces and bonus tiles available, and of course, inevitably, it'll nick stuff and get in your way a lot. I mean, this game is pretty tight at 2 players, and even at 4, it can be pretty nasty, but yeah, at 2, there really isn't a lot going around. But my experience with the solo mode is, again, having to learn 2 rulebooks is a bit of a slog for a Euro game. Thankfully, it's a mid-weight Euro and not a heavy one, so it wasn't quite as bad as some of the others. I mean, it's a bit trickier, for example, to try and learn the rules to Teotihuacan and then try to learn the AI bot in that one. Whew, my head. And don't get me started on Taiwan and Suyu. But here, I wish there was, again, reference cards for each player, so I don't have to keep staring at the rule book, because, yes, okay, this is a good reference guide, but you will be rule checking this quite a bit in your first couple of games. But the experience, once you've conquered that hurdle, is very rewarding, actually, and pretty cool. I dare say, better than the multiplayer, because 2 players, fine. There's 2 of you going around and there's not much spaces, 2-player works. 3 and 4, though, the more that people start making janky combos with all these combo tiles, the more you're sitting there just waiting. Especially if you're just doing a king action on your turn. The downtime gets quite high, and you'd sort of think, well, why am I playing this for 3 or 4? Solo mode, though, once you've got the hang of piloting the AI, and the AI does not take a lot of time on its turn, you can just have fun doing the janky combos. Like, these janky combos are mine. However, this doesn't alleviate the problem that the multiplayer game has, where you're kind of doing a bit of everything, really. The actions are no different, the contracts are no different for you, you play the game as you were, you're just having to deal with an AI as well. So, again, that whole samey problem where you're doing a bit of everything every game, and the king track is boring and sucks, frankly, and the fact that you've still got some of those imbalances for point scoring, and you really can't ignore characters, those faults don't get solved with the solo mode. So really what the solo mode is doing is just allowing you to enjoy the combo building and the decision of which dice to take in a shorter, quicker, more manageable amount of time, but then you have to learn twice as many rules to get to that point. So as much as I say that I think the solo mode is the best way to, well, actually, I don't know. I probably would say 2-player is the best way to play this game, because 2 of you won't take too long with the turns, you haven't got to learn an entire rulebook, you don't have the AI player, and 2 of you will get through this game relatively quickly. And I stand by the player scaling from my last video. I think this is definitely a 2-player game. It gets worse as you add more players in, and so I would probably rank 2-player, solo, 3-player, 4-player as my ranking for like what you should play this game as. If you have a spouse that you want to play this with, though, and you're like, well, I tend to play a few games solo, and you're one of these people who wants a solo in every game. I mean, I love solo games, and I do play a lot of solo games, but I don't think every game needs one. You can have a game without a solo mode. It is possible. Some people will kick a fuss, but seriously, it's not like you're strapped for choice. But the solo mode in this is decent. This is one of David Turkey's better solo modes in terms of, understanding it and how it operates. So I gotta give credit where it's due. This is definitely one that will please you if this is your intention for when you buy Tiletum, you want a solo mode. So all in all, pretty good. I gave the multiplayer game, well, I'm not going to spoil what I gave the multiplayer game, but I think the solo mode is worthy of a 7 out of 10. It's good. I endorse it. I think this will suit anybody who's a Daniele Tassini and Luciani fan and wants a solo Euro and doesn't care about the extra rulebook or the fact that this game is as beige as it will get out. But, that's a problem with the multiplayer as well as the solo. So that's it for me. Remember, if you like what you see, you can thumb up the video. Consider subscribing to the Patreon to help me out with review copies and just to keep the channel going equipment-wise. But most of all, get your comments down below. Do you like Tiletum? Do you think it's better solo or multiplayer? What do you think of the T games? What do you think primarily of David Turksey's solo modes. Do you like his format? Are you comfortable with the rule books? Do you like the priority diagrams? Or better still, because he's done so many, why don't we inflate his ego a little bit, and if you can, give me your top 10 David Turksey solo modes. He's done plenty. There's a lot out there, and if you're a David Turksey fan and you play solo games, I'm pretty sure some of you have got a top 10 list you could do for him. I'd be interested to read that and hear your thoughts. That'd be quite cool. But until next time, you can check out more content on the channel, including, of course, the multiplayer video for this, but I've done Terracotta Army as well from Board and Dice, and I've done various other videos like my top 100, which I will get back to. Don't worry, I've just got a lot of content to do before this, before Essen, okay? But take care, and remember, as always, regardless of whether you want to go beige on your own or with other people, it's still only a game. Bye for now.